it's important you have that background. In first attracting, because for you to be able to get investments, there are demands to investments, and the first demand will be that investment will meet business, and then the business will grow profit, because everybody who is talking about or who's bringing investment to you, is basically looking for profit, for output. Let's get that right.
Yeah.
Then when you start talking about economic growth and economic development, it now begin to take you to the realm of social, services. So it is not every investment that is supposed to be leading to your economic growth, but every investment should be able to aid your government, as a result of what, outputs that are getting begin to now grow your social services. It's important to draw that line so that you don't tie investment intricately to economic growth and development. For that to happen, there has to be structures, there has to be infrastructure, there has to be, governance systems, for you to be able to drive it.
And when you talk about structures, that's encompassing.
Yes.
Yes. So break it down.
Okay. Now, first, remember I said to you that the investment is all about putting in more money to earn more money.
Yes.
Okay, using money to chase money. Let's try to make it elementary. And for anybody to want to come into your country, with his investment, be he an angel investor, be he even a hostile investor, be he what even called a vulture investor, be he whoever, what he wants to do is to say, you must be able to prove to me, first and foremost, that there is something here that can reward my investment. Now, in getting that something here, let me take typically the agricultural sector. We keep mounting, we have 83 million hectares of arable land. Yes, that could form an investment interest, but it wouldn't necessarily be the basis of an investment decision. Now, what's the difference? Now, in taking it from interest to decision, the first thing the person will be asking will be security. Okay, how safe am I going to be? How safe would my projects be? How safe will my workers be? How safe will my infrastructure be? How safe will my equipment be? Now, the second will be, do you have the human capital to be able to support what it is I want to do? Third will be, do you have the infrastructure, okay, to be able to make certain that by the time I put in this investment, I'm able to evacuate, okay, whatever it is I'm yielding, okay, from point of yield, or what you call farm gate, or mine gate, okay, to market. Now, the third will be energy. The fourth will be storage. So it's not just enough for you to say, okay, we have very arable land. I mean, you've talked about our population. Again, you look at us talking about having 55% of our population being youthful. Okay? What you're basically talking about is brawn. But brawn is not enough. You need brawn and brain. Now, this is where your skill sets would come in. These are the kind of things that, an investor, okay, would look at. We announced some very juicy deals, being signed, okay.
Which we're also going to be looking at some of those juicy deals you talked about. But let Benny come in now. Benny?
Well, it's good to be here, like I said earlier on, and like Dr. Kengo has rightly pointed out the differences. Now, she has mentioned, yes, a time before now we've had investment announcements made, some portfolio investment, some not. Government is coming in, particularly this administration. Their focus is on how to attract investment, not just foreign direct investment, but also domestic investment. To say government really doesn't have business in itself, but creating a conducive environment. What is that environment, do you think, Doctor, we need to get in place for these investors, not just to indicate interest, but to follow up to realization?
Well, the first will be your policy, okay? Because against your policy, you'll be talking about your fiscal policy, your trade policy, your monetary policy, your industrial policy, your security policy, your human capital development policy, and all that. Now, after policy, will be your programs. All right, now this is where you begin to now translate this policy into, against deliverables and timelines. And against that will be actions. And it is at that level of action that you now begin to now tie in all the levels, because at the level of policy, we'll basically be talking about government. Now, at the level of program, you'll probably be talking about, your institutions, okay? And then at the level of actions, you basically be talking about where policy now meets business. Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay. And yes, like you mentioned, this administration, the first thing, if you remember, the president had done when it was to sign some executive orders, rescinding some earlier decisions, especially when it got to the area of multiple taxation, because these are the kind of things. The first thing an investor will do is to look at your tax regimes. I mean, how much of my money am I able to take out? And it's sad that I think about 2, 3, 5 in the past 2-3 days, I mean, the international community has also, blacklisted Nigeria, technically as a place where it is not favorable for investment. And I tell you the reason they're giving, repatriation of funds, unprofitable, slippery, place to put any investment. And this is from a report from what you call the International Investing Community.
Okay, Doctor, to hold on your thought, talking about that particular data, it's something that has been before now. And coming in of this new administration, the president in his inaugural speech made pronouncements as regards to handling such issues, saying he is telling investors not to just procrastinate, but they should come in. And they shouldn't just come in to meet the business environment to be business as usual, but he's promising once you make such investment, he's promising a return on investment, and those trade investment inhibitions are going to be taken out. Like you rightly mentioned, the executive orders were to also help the fiscal policy space, where we have a committee that has been set to ensure that reforms, like the practicable reforms, are carried out in the tax. Looking at the tax laws, there are those that are supposed to come fast, quick wins in 3 months, and are those that will have to go through the process of legislation to change. This is in process. So at this level, should this deter investors from coming in?
Well, unfortunately, money is the biggest coward you can ever have in any room. Okay, it flees, before thinking. Okay, and if you had your roots, either your husband's or your wife's, as MD of banks, and then one of you, he picks up his phone to read at that bank, she might be on the way to the bank to withdraw her money before placing a call to you. Okay, basically that is money. So it's not enough to make verbal assurances. You need to create those institutions, and agreements and covenants that protect people's monies, because 80% of the times they say to you, that is beyond them. Okay, because you see, these are borrowed funds, these are monies that they're holding in trust for people. Well, the president is doing tremendously well. I mean, as expected of him. I mean, that's his area. Okay, he's shown capacity. He's doing what they call Toknadu, as we say in Nigeria. Okay, he's hit the ground running. He's meeting both government and the private sector wherever he's going, and they're scoring a lot of firsts, especially with the BASA thing. Appreciating the relationship and what UAE has come to mean, to us vis-a-vis trading. But unfortunately, it's still lopsided. I mean, even if you had those flights, coming in, what you're going to be loading will be Nigerians who are taking, naira, hard-earned naira converted into foreign currency to go and, buy from the UAE, set up facilities, trading facilities, and then bring back here, to start now loading on already, stretched out market systems. Now, what we should do, and I'm sure that they're also working at it, okay, is to try to see how you can be able to bring what we call the balance of trade. Okay, begin to look at those areas that can make you begin to earn this almighty forex. Okay, because until you're bringing something to the table, you're going to be having a favorable, balance of trade. And as long as that happens, no matter how much you want to assure people, they're going to be looking more at what the market says than what the president is saying.
Okay, and in line with what Benny has, pointed out, in as much as the lopsidedness you're trying to point out, there's still progress, which we haven't seen manifest. The $15 billion investment deal by the Indian, when the president went for the G20 summit, that's another one in the offing. We have the G77 group that the vice president is going to be participating on. So these are actually prospects for Nigeria. Let's look at the bright side. What areas of concentration? It's one thing to mention this hard currencies that will be coming into the country, but in terms of streamlining strategic areas of concern for these investors, what will be your recommendation?
It will be the foreign exchange. That's the most strategic input you can get. But having also said that, you see, the $50 billion deal, a lot of it is going into our steel sector, and development, people are want to say steel is development and development is steel. You get your steel sector right, you're up and running on the development value chain. Now, but having said that, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, because you use the right words to when you said prospects, okay? These prospects must be able to translate into actionable programs that have very clear returns on these investments and inputs, okay? But I think it's work in progress. It's not the unfortunately, what happens is that it takes very little time to destroy, but a long period to rebuild. Okay, the destruction that happened to the Nigerian infrastructure, systems happened over a long period of time, over a 30-year period. Okay, it's like when you have a place that has been ravaged, by war consistently for 40 years, and then somebody walks in and says, okay, it was like what happened for those of us in who are Christians when Jesus was saying, I'm going to destroy Jerusalem and rebuild it in 3 days. The Pharisees and the Sadducees were like, this guy got to be nuts. Okay, but he wasn't saying that. It was a figurative statement of, first and foremost, I'm going to be building a new ideal, a new mental state of heart for us to be able to now start reconciling with God. And I think that's very difficult to see, which is what I think the president is trying to sell. Okay, by his saying, I'm awake all through the night thinking about you, I'm out there meeting everybody I need to meet, I'm breaking all protocols if you need to meet me, and then he's saying, come into my country, whatever it is you need. Now, those assurances are good, at the level of saying, okay, we can go and take a look. However, it won't be enough, to be able to support what it is that is needed. But what's clear is that the acceptance is acceptance, the deals he's signing clearly shows that we are not as bad, okay, especially in the world of investments. I'm not trying to say that our economy is any better. We're really in a very bad shape when you talk about our economic indices and indicators, but we're down, if you may, but we're not out. Okay, that would be the right way to put it. I like
the fact that we're not out yet, because Nigeria is work in progress. Even with the odds, even as much as we want to focus on the prospect, the deals coming in, and you mentioned some of the indices that determines this ease of doing business. You talked about the tax laws, you talked about the policies, the economic policies, and also government regulations. These are areas that we should be keeping our house clean on to ensure that when these investors come in, there's ease in doing that business.
And you see what's critical, what I'm trying to say here is that I think it was Benny that said that government has no business in business. Well, the greatest of the business is bringing people around, onto a table. Okay, it's been that having that capacity and ability to be able to bring those who should be on that table to be on the table, and this is where government has to do a lot of work. I think at this point now, what we need is not government of Nigeria doing everything for us. I think we should now go back to the days of Uncle Sam, who says, don't ask for what America can do for you, ask for what you can do for America.
Yes.
But in trying to do that, there was a lot of access, okay? There was a lot of blurring, political lines. There was a lot of, head hunting for anybody who had any ideas, there's a lot of, setting up of, strategic working groups, okay, who could sit and anybody who had an idea. I remember some time ago, a long time ago, memos were being asked from people who had ideas of how things could be done. Not necessarily going to the National Assembly and having public hearings, but, setting up small discussion groups, okay, that begin to align, the policy trust of the subnationals at the level of the community development associations. I'm not even talking about the local government now. To now the local government, to now the state government, to now, okay, the national government. And it won't be the usual strategy we'll have or usual governance structures we'll have. This should be business unusual.
Yeah.
Okay, I would have been thinking about a situation where the president, is going to India and you don't see the usual faces, okay, that somehow everybody sees around, presidents, big boys, if you may. You see people who are innovators, okay, who have innovated, and you see the Ministry of Science and Technology being in the fore of this. You see programs in the mining sector, okay, being critical to what it is we present. I'll give you a very typical example with the mining sector where, you had mentioned kindly, that I worked in creating mining corridors. I mean, the mining sector of Nigeria, if you understand how it works well, can actually develop all your whole infrastructure, okay, just based on institute values of your mineral resources. Okay, so it's not enough for you to wake up and say, okay, you know what, we want to make the Nigerian mining sector look like NNPC. I mean, that would be wrong for me because NNPC was a trading company until very recently. Okay, and what they were trading were, a product that had proven reserves. Right? So investors were coming against those, seismic studies, and then, values have been created. Now, for you to be able to do that in the mining sector, you will need some level of statute-supported, governance systems to be able to drive it before you start going towards the CAMA, systems, which is where you will now start, talking about business. So, development is a very complicated but very interesting, area if you understand it well. And then I give a typical example now. Everybody now says, oh, be careful, don't use hot iron on your clothes. And nobody's told you why. Because you're no longer wearing cotton. In fact, if it was cotton, the hotter the iron, what you're wearing
smoother
is petrochemical.
Yeah.
And nobody will tell you that. But I mean, if we leave this studio and you go what they call non-woven, that's what each and every one of us is wearing.
Mine is cotton.
It wouldn't be 100%, I can trust me. Okay, I'll put $1 against it. At the best, it will be polyester. Now, polyester is petrochemicals. Now, this is us. Somebody sent me, Ruth, a very interesting clip. Maybe I'll share it with Benny to share with you. And this was a tour guide in South Korea. And the tour guide, I think there was Nigerian in that bus, and says, you know what, we buy petrol from Nigeria, crude oil from Nigeria, and we have the biggest refinery in South Korea, and we refine this petrol and sell it back to Nigeria. I mean, this is a tour guide. And then she goes on to say, oh, that's not even all. We buy, water from Malaysia or some country, and then we refine this water, and then we sell it back to them. So if you don't understand that there's a back end to development, okay, you're going to be looking at investors who, like I told you at the beginning, are only interested in securing their investments and then getting, what values they can get.
Okay, talking about values, like you mentioned earlier, where is the place of investment from out there and meeting business from in here? There is the issue of skills gap where investors talk about. For instance, there is a refinery that is taking off very soon in Lagos, and we hear some skilled people were imported from outside this country into the country. And Nigerians are saying, is it that we don't have this expertise in-house? How ready can we be in such guys?
I tell you, it's just what they call standardization and certification.
Okay.
You'll be very surprised that the Institute of Estate Valuers and Surveyors, I stand to be corrected, that stamp that they put on documents it comes from an institute in Britain, okay, in the UK. Okay, now you'll be surprised that in the mining sector, the JOC of South Africa, which is the Mining Exploration Reporting Standards, and the Cisco of UK, I don't think they're affiliated. So these are the kind of things investors will look at to say, okay, your reporting, exploration, mining development reporting are standardized. Now, it doesn't take rocket science to do this. It takes understanding the process to do it. Yeah. And it takes understanding that is also a major demand. Because you see, when these investments are going to be discussed, the nitty-gritties, the president is not going to be sitting there. Okay, he'll be needing these people. And then, the first to begin to do is to say, listen, I am a member of this institute. Nigeria has been able to get affiliated with this institute. So whatever report you're going to be reading, I'm going to be handing over to you, are stamped by these authorities. So that's where I think there's a major gap. And that's why I'm saying that at this point in time in our nation's life now, it is at a time where you're talking about where do we meet these local investments. Okay, it's at that point in time where your statute provisions must be carefully tailored to be able to meet CAMA demands.
And this brings us to human capital development, which you mentioned earlier. You can have all of this work effectively when there's no well-structured human capital development. You have to boost skills to see return on investment. Even if we're trying to keep our house in order to attract these foreign investments, in the area of capacity building for the nation, what will be your recommendation? My
recommendation will be the replication of what NTA is doing, with your School of Television. From a diploma awarding institute, they're affiliated to ABU Zaria and are giving degrees. It's correct?
Yes.
And that's where you have, you are the representation of true journalism. Okay, now imagine a situation when we were growing up. If you had anybody who had a trade certificate, okay, that person will teach professors because they were the people who were hands-on. And you had those, institutes all over the country, but not one is standing today. If you know any mechanic, anybody who is a workman who has value, he probably, is a product of that, trade centers. You used to have trade centers. I'm not even sure, sorry. You guys might even be too young, to know about them, but they were there.
Many may not be too young.
That's why I put the caveat. Okay. But they were there, okay, and they brought the best that could. And way back in those days, that's where you had, cars, talking about people who could cut your car from 010 to 040. I'm sure you also might not even know what I'm talking about. I mean, the crankshaft of a car could knock 4 times, and somebody would be able to now keep cutting that crankshaft up till it got to 040.
It was done with usually, I would like to say the oldest, I don't want to call the name of the company, an indigenous France car, the older one. You could do that with that, but not recent technology.
No, you could do with everything. What I'm trying to say to you is that what you have these days now is that the day your car makes a noise and you go to any mechanic, they're saying change the parts.
Straight up.
That's it, because all you need to become a mechanic now is to go and buy an overall and watch another guy change.
Okay.
And change those parts.
Dr. Okengu, let's hold that thought. We have to take this break. When we come back, we'll pick up. Stay tuned.
What are we doing as a nation to first of all settle our teeming populace, especially the
NTA's political package with a third eye on the nation's political scene? I am Fisa Ogunfuyi. Welcome.
You have to be very careful giving space to people who are obviously sponsored to further the agenda of some other groups.
There's a lot of questions. A lot of questions in a closed door sessions. Some of these issues, some of the problems bedeviling of their.
In fact, between June 1st and July 17, 19-point-something billion has left the coffers of the NDDC.
I can say my constituency, they need everything because we don't have anything.
Good to have you there. The conversation is still on investment opportunities towards economic growth. Dr. Okengo, you were sharing us the past, glory, some of those past glory when we had it good in terms of manufacturing thereabout. But I want you to look at this critical area. There's this outcry by the federal government that 90% of the nation's scarce resource is being, used to service external debts. And you can't, look at this economic theory as one that should continue. If poverty reduction and investment promotion must thrive in the country, then there should be revenue generation in the country. Are we doing well enough in that aspect?
Well, you see, one of the arguments I've held, over these years is do not take money that won't get you out of the woods. And this is how we got into a lot of this debt management or debt payment of a debt. What do they call it? Interest on debts? We're not even paying the debts. Servicing these debts now. Because of the decay in infrastructure and because of, public, outcry to, oh, my government did this. Okay, part of what created this problem is when we started now, reducing or renaming or reclassifying government programs against individuals. All right, or this administration, that administration. Because way back in those days, what we had were national rolling plans that had 5-year rollover programs. Okay, it didn't matter, who now entered into that 5-year cycle. But you see, this time around, first thing you see is, the people in public office say, my government did this, my government did that, my government did this. I mean, that wasn't the case before. Okay, what we're hearing now, government did this, government did that. It didn't matter who in government did it. And because of the rancorous nature of our politics, 90% of the times, anything a government, a government that had left, started, wasn't touched to the 10 people by the next government, even when, they come from the same political systems. So that mindset has created a lot of, what I might call start and stop. Okay, not start to finish. All right, so until you have that, law that says if you start a road, no matter who starts that road, it's a 200-kilometer road, that should have a timeline, borrow for the 200-kilometer roads. And this is why it seems as if other people are doing magic. What to do is to borrow and then go and look for more money to borrow and then go and look for more money to borrow. And by the time you're going back to borrow, a lot of what you've achieved would have been lost. And then you need to start again. But if you wanted to borrow and you needed $1 trillion, okay, and that's what I say to you, we're borrowing against, what we call irrevocable payment, standing payment orders. Instead of saying, how can we as a country have 6 billion metric tons of iron ore, 6 billion metric tons of coal, 6 billion metric tons of this? Just remembering that what I'm about to say now had just happened less than a month ago, when government in needing money got into a forward purchase agreement, okay, for, the forward purchase sales of our crude. What that means that they have collected money, okay, from crude oil that was to be sold sometime in the future. Okay, now if you had the mining or the agricultural sector giving you that value, now it becomes a lot easier for you to now tie, the resources to the development, exploration, exploitation of that mine, okay, into the development of what we call the allied infrastructure.
Okay, Doctor, if it's a fact that the extractive sector or economy, talking about the solid minerals, talking about oil and gas, as well as agriculture, are avenues where we need investment as a country and where investments can be really, really large. Yes, we have agencies of government that are meant to make the process smooth, talking about hand-holding mechanisms. But yet, you hear daily reportage in the media and people who are witnessing it, where you have people coming in to mine these solid minerals without proper registration, without proper licensing. How much are we losing? How can we tame that? You've done research in that light.
Well, from NIT government reports, I mean, over a past 10-year period, maybe about $8 billion have just been lost in the illegal exportation, exploitation of gold. We're not even talking about, the more valuable. Everybody thinks that gold is the most valuable, but it's not. When you talk about other minerals like lithium now, other minerals like tantalites, where you get your tantalum powder, other minerals like coltan, other minerals, so much. Okay, so, but what this is all about is us not understanding what needs to be done properly. Okay, I mean, somebody says to you, we are losing 300,000, 400,000 barrels of oil every day, and you want to wonder how. Because if you understand the shipping sector very well, I mean, the moment any ship gets into any territorial waters, 20 nautical miles, I mean, they begin to track it. There is no ship that enters into Nigeria or that is in any water. It's like an airplane. You say that an airplane takes off from, and you don't know where it took off from, and you don't know where it landed. How?
It's not possible.
How? It's not even, it won't even happen, because you need to be given a flight plan for you to even take off in the air, or somebody's going to be bringing you down. Now, so I think what it is we need to do is to have a proper sense of appreciating that as a country, okay, we have some gaps. And the first gap we have, for me, is data. Okay, the first gap we have in this country is data. We don't have a proper census of how many we are, what we are, qualifications, where we are. If we had a compendium that could show us, right now, I mean, you'll be shocked. I don't think there's any agency of government that can tell you how many people are in Abuja. And there's not been any.
We have estimates.
No, you can't even begin to say that. How can you estimate against what? You don't make those estimates. I mean, that's not possible, because you see, the first thing that happened, at one time, Abuja became where a lot of people who were, on forced migration were running to. It became the safest place in this country, still one of the safest. Okay, so now how can you want to estimate based on what? Did you do any household? You must be able to develop an instrument, and this is where estimate becomes the devil in the room. You can't begin to estimate. What you should do is to begin to carry out that census, and because against this burgeoning number, okay, people are now overloading your transformers, people are now overloading your public facilities, and these things are collapsing every day.
Okay, I like the fact you mentioned the data, the census. Of course, you're aware, you're in the know of that aspect being stalled due to some reasons, We're hoping that will happen, but data, of course, is very important, which takes us to digital economy.
Yeah.
If we're looking at digital economic potentials, if we want a transformative digital system in Nigeria, you're looking at digital skills, digital financial services, digital connectivity. There's a whole lot that can be harnessed that is yet to be harnessed in that aspect.
Yeah.
In the area of investing both locally and attracting investors to come feed us, in that aspect.
Well, you see, this is where your research and research outputs come to play. Do you also have a compendium of your research and research outputs? We have a lot of research institutes and education facilities that have done so amazingly well, you'll be shocked. Okay, I mean, 10 years ago, I had walked into, Naseni, 10 years, and there was this, keke, the tricycle, designed, piloted. There was a proof of concept, but it couldn't go beyond that, because, I mean, that's what the law says they should do.